this video, we're going to begin talking about Chapter 3, and this is the most important chapter in the entire course. Supply and demand, you've heard of it before, you know it has something to do with economics, so you're going to have to make sure that you understand all the little details about everything we talk about supply and demand. And in Chapters 3 and 4, we're going to take what the textbook gives us with supply and demand, and we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're spending 2 weeks on Chapter 3 to make sure that we really get all the details. You're going to have to make sure to spend a lot of time with it, think about it, practice it. So let's dive in. In this video, we're going to focus just on demand. If we spend a lot of time talking about demand and you really understand what demand means and all the little details, then understanding supply becomes very easy. So we're just going to focus on demand today. So let's talk about my demand for pizza right now. So Dr. Berkey's demand for pizza, what do we mean by that and how can we represent it? It's getting a little late and I haven't had any lunch today, and so I'm getting pretty hungry. So one way to discover what somebody's demand is to ask them a series of questions about how much they would want to buy at each different possible price they might see. So we might set up a little table here. And what we're going to draw here is called a demand schedule. Schedule is just a fancy word for a table. So a demand schedule for me might be to say, okay, here are some prices, here are some quantities. And I might say, you know, I'm really hungry. And so if somebody had some pizza here right now, right in front of me, and even if they were to charge a really high price, I really need a slice of pizza because otherwise I'm probably going to fall over. So I might say, you know, even if somebody charged me at most $10, I would buy one slice of pizza. So price, quantity. Now, this isn't my demand yet. My demand represents my entire willingness and ability to buy pizza at this moment. So you've got to be talking about some period of time. So for me, I'm talking about like right now, although we could be talking about my demand over a week period or over a month. I'm just talking about right now, but we have to know for a lot of different prices, how many would I want to buy? So if the price was $10, I'd buy one. And I might say, well, if the price was $8, maybe I'd buy 2 slices of pizza. If the price was $6, maybe I'd buy 3. If the price was $4, I'd buy 4. And if the price was $2, maybe I'd buy 5. And what if I were walking down the hall and I saw that some club had some pizza and they said, hey, Dr. Berkey, come on in. We have free pizza. Price of $0. I might say, oh, great, I'll eat 6 pieces of pizza if they're free. So when we say the word demand, this is a demand table or a demand schedule. Demand is the entire table, okay? So demand represents my willingness and ability to purchase various quantities at various prices I might see. So it's a complete list for each price, what quantity would I want to buy. And we could look at the demand for one person, for a group of people, the demand for an entire city or an entire nation. Let's just keep it with my demand right now to keep it simple. But we'll expand on this in just a bit. So this entire thing would be my demand schedule. So what we're going to want to do a lot of times is work with these numbers, this demand for my demand for pizza, as a graph. So let's graph these points and let's see what we can learn. So when we graph these, we're always going to put price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. We do it that way because an economist named Alfred Marshall back in the 1800s did it that way. So we just stick with putting price on the y-axis to this day. So here we have at a price of $10, quantity of 1. So $10 quantity of 1, $8 quantity of 2, 6, 3, $4 I'd buy 4, $2 I'd buy 5, and if it were free down here at $0, I would eat 6, and Hey, let's continue this logic up for one more point. If this is a straight line, where would this hit the y-axis? It would hit up here at 12. Remember what I said here about this first point. I said, well, if the price was $10, I maybe would buy one, or in other words, we can think about that as meaning the most I'd be willing to pay for one slice of pizza would be $10. So this point up here, this y-intercept of $12, we can interpret as meaning if the price was $12, the quantity that I would want to buy would be 0. So here we have two different ways to represent my demand for pizza. Here we have the demand schedule, this table. Over here we have this graph, and what we would call this would be a demand curve, demand line or demand curve, because in general they're usually going to be curves. In this class we're going to use lines because they're easier to deal with. And a third way we could represent the exact same information that we're talking about, schedule, the curve, would be to represent this line as an equation instead of as a table or a graph. An equation is a much more compact and much more powerful way to write it. So we're going to be using equations quite a bit in this course. So let's think about the equation of a line here. Y, which is price, equals the slope times x plus the y-intercept. Or in economics, usually we'll write the y-intercept first plus the slope times x. Or price equals, what's the y-intercept of this line? It's where when the quantity is 0, the price is 12. Or if the price was 12, the quantity would be 0. So price equals 12. This is a negative slope, so minus, and the slope here is down 2 over 1, right? So rise over run. The rise to get from this point to this point is down 1, 2 over 1. So the slope is minus 2 times x. Or here let's write q, since q is what's on the x-axis down here, the quantity that I would want to buy, or the quantity demanded, as we would call it. So to repeat again, because this is extremely important, this entire line is my demand. This entire equation is my demand. This entire table is my demand, okay? And we could add one more point on there if we wanted to, say at a price of anything, $12 or higher, the quantity I would want would be 0, right? Just add one more point to that table. The entire table is my demand. The entire line or the entire function is my demand. We don't ever say that my demand has changed unless the entire table changes or this line moves. If the line shifts to the right or shifts to the left, we can say demand changed. Or if something causes this equation to change, we can say that my demand has changed, okay? But if the equation, the line, and the table aren't changing, demand hasn't changed. An example of how we would use this without the table or the line actually changing is to say something, for example, suppose yesterday, the favorite restaurant where I go to buy pizza, suppose they usually charge $4 for a slice of pizza, and I buy 4 slices. So in the table, we're in this row. On the graph, we're at this point, $4, 4 slices right there. And in the equation, we'd just be talking about, say, plugging in 4 for the quantity, right? So if the quantity was 4, we know the price would be 12 minus 2 times 4, or $4, right? So 3 ways of looking at exactly the same situation. So normally my pizza place charges me $4 a slice and I buy 4 slices, but today, suppose I have a coupon. And this coupon is for 50% off. How much is pizza today? Well, today pizza is going to be $2. And so since it's cheaper, I'm going to chow down and I'm going to eat 5 slices. When we say the price went from $4 to $2, and now instead of buying 4 slices, I'm buying 5 slices of pizza, we don't say that my demand went up. What we do is we say, when we're just moving from one row in the table to another one, from the 4 to the 5 slices because the price went down, instead we say my quantity demanded increased. So what's happening here is the price is going down and I respond by buying more. The technical way we say that is that my quantity demanded is going up. My quantity demanded increased. This lingo here, this terminology, quantity demanded went up or quantity demanded went down, is sending a signal to the person that you're communicating with that nothing changed. The table didn't change, the line didn't change. We're not dealing with a new equation. All we're doing is we're moving from one row to another, the same demand, or we're moving from one point to another on the same demand line or demand curve, or we're plugging in a new number for quantity or a new number for price, just a different value of the same function. So demand's not changing, the quantity demanded is changing. So quantity demanded just tells us, hey, this person's buying more or less because the price went up or the price went down, but nothing about their willingness or ability to buy pizza has changed. Demand is the willingness and ability to buy various quantities at various prices. Okay? Let's go to our handout for today. Now that we've kind of got an overview of what's going on, and let's look at the details. All right, so here on this page, I have what I call my Chapter 3 Demand and Supply Checklist. What I've done here is tried to put just about all the fundamental ideas from Chapter 3 in one place so we can look at them. If you're a memorizer, you want to start by memorizing everything on this sheet and then making sure you really understand it. Even if you don't like memorizing, what's on this page for demand and supply is extremely important. It's not that much, and you really do have to have all this information in your head ready to go anytime you're talking about supply and demand. So really spend a lot of time with this sheet and get to know everything. We're going to be practicing this information a lot over the next few videos, so it should sink in. If not, spend a little bit extra time with it. And so let's just fill in these points that we were talking about before, and you need to do the same along with me here to make sure that you understand what's going on. The only way to do it is to just do it. Think about what we're doing and why along with me. So here's that demand curve that we were talking about. Let's label that with a little d. And here is the equation. We had price equals 12 minus 2q. I'll write the table here real quickly as well. Okay, just to say this one more time, because repetition is the only way for things to stick. Demand is the willingness and ability to buy certain quantities at certain prices. So for a lot of different prices, a lot of different quantities, the whole set of outcomes there is demand. It's not just one number. When we're talking about demand, demand is really telling us, as price goes up or down, how are people going to respond to that? How much less are people going to buy as price goes up? How much more are people going to buy as price goes down? Now, what this demand table, the demand schedule, the demand function over here, demand equation, and the demand curve are all illustrating is what we call the law of demand. And the law of demand says that as price goes up, quantity demanded has gone down, right? So that's the second point here. If only the price is changing, if the only thing that's changing is somebody sees a higher price, they're going to buy less. If they see a lower price, they'll buy more. We say the quantity demanded has gone up or the quantity demanded has gone down. Now, what are some things that could actually change demand? Because I have been saying forever that when price changes, it doesn't change demand. What are some things that could change demand? You could list a lot of things. Here are the fundamental ones. First, people's incomes are going up or down, or their wealth are going up or down. Now, income is different from wealth. Income is a flow of money. It's like the paycheck that comes in every couple of weeks or every month. That's income. Wealth is like a puddle of money that if you spend money slower than money comes in, money is going to accumulate. So a pool of money that you have saved is wealth. So let's imagine, suppose as I was coming into work today, I look down on the ground and I find a $100 bill. That would be changing not really my income, it would just be changing the amount of money I have. If I got a raise, that would change my income. So my wealth goes up. I have another $100 to my name now that I didn't have before. Let's imagine, how might that change my demand for pizza now that I have more money? Well, let's suppose we ask me this question, and let's say this is my old demand now. Let's call that the old quantities. Let's make a new list now that I have more money. And I say, you know, it used to be that at $12 I wouldn't buy any. Now, since I have all this extra money, at $12 I'll buy one. And maybe at $10 now I would buy two instead of one. And at $8 I'd buy three. So let's just add one to each of these amounts that I would buy before. And just to be honest, I don't know why it would make sense if it's free, why I would want to eat one more, but let's just say that makes sense just to pretend. So now we see that something has changed the entire table, right? So now we can say my demand changed. Let's graph these new numbers. All right, so at 12, I'd want to buy one, and at 10, two, etc. We're just adding one to each. And if we draw a line through those, now we have a new demand. Let's label that D2, new demand. So what would we want to call this? Would we call this an increase in my demand for pizza or a decrease in my demand for pizza? Of course, we'd call this an increase in demand because the quantities I want to buy at all those prices has now gone up. So I want to buy more than I used to at each of the prices that we saw, and so that's an increase in demand. And we can say it's an increase in demand because the entire table changed, right? The line shifted here, right? The line shifted to the right. And this is in general always going to be the case, that an increase in demand is when demand shifts to the right, higher quantities at each price. A decrease in demand will be when it shifts to the left. But if it's not moving at all, demand's not changing, right? So if we're just moving from one point to another on the same line, quantity demanded is changing. So here I found some money that increased my demand for pizza. And we could also illustrate how this would change the entire equation as well, right? Because this line we're looking at, if we were to extend that line all the way up, it looks like it would hit at a y-intercept of 14. And so we could say the new equation looks like it would be 14 minus 2q. The slope is the same. Those two lines are parallel, but the y-intercept is higher. So that's one way we could increase demand, is by changing the y-intercept of the function, making it a larger number. Now, there are two things that can happen, though, when your income changes. Now, if your income goes up, that could increase your demand for a product, as it did here. So I have more money, I want to buy more pizza. However, that's not necessarily the case. There's another possibility. There are some things that when your income goes up, you actually want to buy less of them. And what we call those things, if your income goes up and you want to buy less, we call those inferior goods. A normal good is what you would normally think. Hey, this person has more money. They want to buy more stuff. So normally you want to buy more stuff, income goes up, demand increases. That's a normal good. An inferior good is the opposite. But be careful. in the English dictionary, if you look up the word inferior, you're going to get something like something that's low quality or something people don't like, it's inferior. That is not what we mean in economics. In economics, all we mean by the word inferior is these are goods that we have observed in the real world that when people's incomes go up, people's demands go down. So income goes up, demand goes down, or the opposite. We observe people's incomes go down, and that causes demands to go up. Those are inferior goods. Popular examples of inferior goods. My favorite one would be ramen noodles. Ramen noodles, there's nothing wrong with them. That's not what we mean by the word inferior. But when I was a student at the end of the semester and I started to run out of money and I couldn't go to the cafeteria anymore, and I just had a few dollars left in my name and I just had to wait until I got a summer job to earn some more money, if I needed to eat, you could go to the grocery store and you could get a lot of packs of ramen noodles for $1. And it's a way to keep your stomach full of something, keep you from starving to death for not a lot of money. But when your income goes up or your wealth goes up, if you have a lot of money in the bank account, you're probably not going to go stock up on a whole lot of ramen noodles and eat them. Personally, ever since I got out of my 11 and a half years of going to college for my bachelor's degrees and my master's degree and my PhD, I have not bought one package of ramen noodles ever since. So it's an inferior good. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with them. They're fine. It's just income goes up, you buy less. Income goes down, you buy more. Some other examples we might see. For example, just all sales at Walmart. Typically what we observe is that when we go into a recession in the United States and people's incomes are going down, Walmart does quite well. So does a store like Dollar General. But when people's incomes are going up, people tend to shop at places like Walmart less and shop at places, say, like Target or Belk or Kohl's a little bit more. But it's also important to be careful that we can't just generalize sometimes. For some individual people, we might see some goods they look at as an inferior good, but other people might look at it as a normal good. Just take, for example, suppose somebody has a very low income and they don't have any car at all, but then they get a better job, their income goes up, they might go out and buy a Hyundai. A Hyundai for them would be a normal good because their income went up and they bought more. On the other hand, that same person might get an even better job and they decide, you know what, I can do better than a Hyundai now. And when their income goes up again, they buy less Hyundais and more Hondas. And that same person gets a even higher income later on in life, and they start buying less Hondas and maybe more BMWs or more Acuras or something like that. When we say that a good is an inferior good, we mean that on average in the economy, it seems to behave like an inferior good. One last example of an inferior good is McDonald's coffee. Again, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with McDonald's coffee. It's fine. I like it. It's just that we observed in the most recent recession we had in the United States back in 2008 that when people's incomes started to go down, people started to buy a lot less Starbucks, where you're spending $4, $5, $8 on coffee, and people started to go to McDonald's instead. And McDonald's started to see this trend, and that's why we have the McCafe. They said, well, hey, we see some of these customers coming to us from Starbucks. Let's try to develop our coffee line a little bit more fancy. And if people can get something that's a pretty good quality for $2 instead of for $5, maybe we can make a lot of money in this sector. And McDonald's did very well. So people's incomes went down. They bought more McDonald's coffee, inferior good. When people's incomes recovered, a lot of people started going back to Starbucks. So Starbucks is more of a normal good. McDonald's coffee, more of an inferior good. Doesn't say anything about good or bad quality. It's just how does it relate to income? Now, what other things can affect demand here? Well, the number of people in an economy, the population size, can affect demand, of course. Let's look at another example here. Now I'm going to erase this Q2 so I can do another example. I think you should probably keep yours, but let me just try to make things clear. Start over here. Suppose that Q1 here, as we were talking about before, this column is my demand for pizza. How much do I want to buy at every price? Now, suppose that in addition to me, suppose my twin brother moved to town. I don't have a twin brother, but let's just go with it for a minute here. So if my twin brother comes to town, and it's not just me buying pizza, but it's me plus my twin brother. And I say twin brother because let's pretend that his demand is exactly the same as mine. What would our total demand look like? So in this column right here, let's put my demand plus my twin, right? So let's just say Q plus Q. So what would this look like? Well, what we do is we just look at each price and we add up how much would I want plus how much would my brother want, right? So let's look at $12. If the price was $12, I don't want any. How much total would I and my twin want? 0 plus 0, 0. All right. Well, at $10, I want to buy one slice. How much would I and my twin together want to buy? 2. All right. At 8, I want to buy 2, so my twin and I together would buy 2 plus 2 or 4. 6. 4 plus 4 is 8. 5 plus 5 is 10. 6 plus 6 is 12. Let's graph this to see what it would look like. So graphing these points in blue, we have 12 and 0, 10 and 2, 8 and 4, 6 and 6, 4 and 8, 2 and 10, and 0 and 12. All right, let's call this D3 here. So this would be what would happen if the population doubled from just me to me and my twin. So here we see kind of another way that we can see an increase in demand. It doesn't have to be a parallel shift like we saw from the red to the green. It could be kind of a rotation out where the slope gets a little flatter here, right? So the slope of this blue line is only going to be -1, and the equation here would be P equals 12 as the y-intercept minus 1Q. And that's an increase in demand as well, resulting from having more people. So it kind of makes sense. If you have more people, they're going to want to buy more at whatever price. They're going to buy more than they would with less people. Now, let me give you an example of this. I went to college for my undergraduate degrees in Appalachian State University up in the mountains of North Carolina. And back when I was there were about 10,000 students at the university, plus there were about another 10,000 people that lived in the town, professors and, just everyday folks that worked at grocery stores, hardware stores, banks, and all that kind of good stuff. An interesting thing would happen every time we had spring break or fall break or Christmas break. I would come back and I'd go to the grocery store, and in the grocery store, they would have just piles and piles of bread that was getting ready to go bad, and milk that was getting ready to go bad, and eggs and all kinds of stuff. Anything that is perishable, anything that can go bad, the store had ordered too much, and now they were trying to figure out how to get rid of it, putting it on clearance. And it always amazed me that these stores were too ignorant, is a good word. They just didn't understand that when you have spring break or fall break or Christmas break, that the population in the town is getting cut in half. And so the amounts you're going to sell of everything, but especially critical or things that are going to go bad quickly, is going to be cut in half because they're not adjusting the price until after the things start to go bad, right? So the population is an important determinant of demand. More people, higher demand. Less people, less demand. A third factor that can change demand are what we call tastes and preferences. Now, this is just kind of a generic term we use for how people feel about things. What they want is just changing for whatever reason. A few examples here would just be whatever's popular now. people want more of at every price. So if something gets more popular, it's going to have an increase in demand. If things get less popular, the opposite. Also, if we're talking about my pizza demand personally, if I decide to go on a diet, I might decide to decrease my demand just because my tastes and preferences. I prefer less pizza because I'm trying to be healthier now. So also, you can think about as what we need in a society changes. For example, cars are invented. Well, people are going to buy cars and fewer horse and buggies and things like that. And lastly, a common thing we could use as an example of tastes and preferences changing is maybe we learn more information about a product. So if we learn that something is healthy now, the demand's going to increase. On the other hand, if we learn that something causes cancer, back when the Surgeon General announced that smoking causes cancer and emphysema and all kinds of other diseases, stay away from cigarettes. When that starts to sink in, people will start to smoke less, and so the demand for cigarettes decreases. So that's all due to what we call tastes and preferences changing. Next category, the prices and availability of other related goods are changing. Complements and substitutes. What's a complement? A complement is a good that goes together or is normally consumed with some other product. So for example, maybe peanut butter and jelly for most people, right? Most people eat those together. However, for me, it's peanut butter and honey. I'm not a big jelly fan, but I really like honey on my sandwiches. So for me, complements would be peanut butter and honey. Now, notice here that complement in this case is spelled with an E here. If you put an I here in complement, that's like, oh my, don't you look nice today in that hat. But a complement with an E means things that go together to make a whole, two parts of a whole, for example. Substitutes, on the other hand, are things that could be used in place of each other. So you could use one or the other. They don't really go together so much. So substitutes might be things like Pepsi and Coca-Cola, or two different kinds of things you could put on a sandwich, or two different things you could have for dinner. I don't know, maybe something like pizza and lasagna would be substitutes. Just two different things that serve the same kind of purpose. You're going to buy one or the other, not both, on a normal occasion. So how this works is, and this is kind of as complicated as this stuff gets, thinking about complements and substitutes, is to look at a scenario like the following. Suppose the red is my demand for pizza, and suppose while I'm out, I'm hungry, I see that say Subway is having a sale. So here's the information we're given. Subway is having a 50% off sale. Now, this is not my demand for Subway that we've graphed here. This is my demand for pizza. So what we want to ask is, if Subway is having coupons for 50% off a sub, how is that going to affect the quantity of pizza that people are going to want to buy at various prices? Well, if all of a sudden I can get a sub a lot cheaper than I used to, it kind of stands to reason that what's going to happen here is that people are going to look at each price that they could see before for pizza, $10, $8, $5, $2, and they're going to say, I don't want to buy as much pizza anymore because I can get really good deals on Subway. So people's demand for pizza is going to decrease when a substitute good becomes available much more cheaply. I'm less willing and I'm less able to buy pizza than I used to because there's this more attractive option that's now cheaper. So the rule here is when the price of a substitute goes down, that decreases the demand for the substitute. When the price of a substitute goes up, that would increase the demand for the substitute. Now, what if we were talking about a complement? Think of a complement to pizza. What's something that would go along with pizza really well? Can you think of anything? Well, maybe a soda, right? Suppose the price of soda went down. Suppose that all the pizza places in town, or I don't know, maybe the whole town said, hey, we're going to have a day today where if you come in, we're going to give you some free soda. So free drink with any purchase kind of thing. Well, if you know that if you go out to the pizza place and the price of soda is going down, or if it's free soda, let's just say it's free soda, the price of a compliment has decreased, how's that going to make you feel about how much pizza you want to buy? You're like, well, before when I was talking about buying one slice of pizza at $10, that was kind of taken into account that I was going to have to spend some money on soda. And if I was going to buy 5 slices of pizza at $2, that was taken into account. I was probably going to have to buy a couple of sodas to go along with that pizza, right? So now that I can get free soda, I'm going to be more willing and able to buy pizza. I have more money left over to buy the pizza with. And so what's that going to do to my demand for pizza? It's going to go up. It's going to shift to the right. So it's not the price of pizza that's causing the demand for pizza to go up. That wouldn't change the demand for pizza. What's happening here is that the demand for pizza is going up because the price of soda, a complement, something that goes along with it, is now cheaper. So that can shift the amount of pizza to the right, increase the quantities I want to buy at each price compared to before. So complements and substitutes. This is, again, one of the more complicated things to understand when it comes to demand. Make sure to practice a few examples. We will be practicing some in some of these lectures, but make sure to think about this on your own. 2 more things that can change demand are sales taxes or excise taxes. Kind of makes sense. Suppose that in order to try to make people healthier, the government decides to put a $2 tax on each slice of pizza. So what this means is now, in addition to what you had to pay before for pizza, now every slice of pizza you buy, you're going to have to pay a $2 tax on, kind of like a sales tax, right? How's this going to make you feel about how much pizza you want to buy at each of these prices? Is it going to make you more willing and able to buy pizza compared to before, or less willing and able to buy pizza? Well, this tax is going to discourage you from buying as much pizza as you used to. And so what it's going to do is decrease your demand for pizza. It's going to be a shift to the left compared to before. And indeed, this is something the government does to try to get people to consume less of things. We have alcohol taxes and cigarette taxes for this reason. And last example in this video, getting to know demand, is consumer expectations about the future. Can change your demand now. What am I talking about? Well, what I'm saying here is, suppose you were a senior and you had a job offer. You haven't gotten the job yet, and your income has not gone up yet, right? So if your income has gone up, we know that that's something that can shift demand. Consumer income's gone up. But we're not talking about that. We're saying that, well, in the future, you expect that your income will go up next month or 2 months from now. How might that affect your purchasing habits today? Even though nothing's really changed today, it's just what you think is going to happen in the future has changed. Well, of course, that's going to have a similar effect, right? If you think your income's going to be higher next month, that can go ahead and increase your demand for normal goods today. So you might start spending more money on cars and clothes and food now because you think or you expect that your income will go up in the near future. So that's one example of how your expectations might change things. Let me give you one more example. Suppose we weren't talking about pizza at all. Suppose we were talking about gasoline. And suppose, since I'm an economist, I told you, hey, I have a friend. This friend works in Washington, D.C., and he passed along some secret information to me. And he said that in 3 days, the price of gasoline in the United States is going to double. That's right, the price of gasoline is going to double in 3 days' time. And no one knows this yet except for my friend, me, and now I'm sharing this information with you. How is that going to change your behavior today? We're not talking about the price changing today. We're talking about, we think, The price will change. The price will double in 3 days. What are you going to do as soon as you stop watching this video if you think that's going to happen? Well, today, suppose the price of gasoline was $2 per gallon, and normally you would buy 5 gallons of gas in a given week when the price of gas is $2. Everyone right now is going to go, if they think the price of gas is getting ready to double, everybody's going to leave right now and they are going to buy a lot more at that price of $2, trying to get ahead of the curve, trying to get ahead of that price increase. So as soon as we see a point like this one, where the price has not actually gone up, but we see people buying a lot more than they used to, that's an increase in demand. It's telling us that there must be another demand curve over here somewhere and that it must have increased. People's expectations, rumors, what they think will happen can change behavior today and can increase or decrease demand for goods today based on what they think is going to happen. So I'm going to end this video here. Please think carefully about everything we were talking about: demand schedules, demand functions, demand curves, what can change demand versus a change in quantity demanded. And if all of that material sinks in, then supply is going to be very easy. So what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to talk about similar kinds of information about supply, but we can do it much more quickly because you understand how demand works and supply is pretty similar. The big difference with supply is we're looking at things from the producer's viewpoint. How are they going to respond to price changes? And what are the things that will cause them to change the amount they want to produce at various prices? In other words, change their supply. If you have any questions, please leave a comment or question, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.